One of believes that vaccine saved millions of lives. Is this true?
In the United States, the idea that vaccines save millions of lives a year is just completely contrary to the data. That's off by probably 99.9 something percent or more. In the book, in chapter 7, I go through each vaccine in the US, the year it was licensed or widely used, and how many people died of that disease in the year before. What you'll find is for virtually all of them, it's dozens to hundreds often. That's far from millions. Now, every death is a tragedy, but it's nowhere near. I mean, cumulatively, it is almost an insignificant number of annual deaths in the United States. And critically, almost all of those diseases, the mortality was declining rapidly before there was even a vaccine. After the introduction of the vaccine, often that death decline continues at the same rate. I'm not saying the vaccine can't be attributed to potentially some of the reduction, but even then, even when there is a reduction after, at least part of it is probably nothing to do with the vaccine. But yet, the way the public health authorities talk about it, they will not only attribute all the decline after the vaccine to the vaccine, right? They'll even attribute the reduction of mortality before there was a vaccine to the vaccine. I'll use just more measles very quickly. Measles, the death rate in the US declined by over 98% from 1900 to 1963 when the first vaccine was introduced. Over 98%. That had nothing to do with the vaccine because there was no vaccine. And we were down to about 400 deaths a year. That's 1 in 450,000 Americans were dying of measles in the years before there was a vaccine, at a time when everybody got measles. That's far from what they lead you to believe. Now, that mortality would likely have continued. But yet you listen to the CDC and public health authorities, and they make it sound like the only reason that measles mortality declined was because of the vaccine. The funny part is public health authorities could take some credit for the decline before the vaccine, better sanitation, better living conditions, a better acute medical care, but they never do. They just point to the vaccine.
There is one interesting story about polio vaccine, and you explain inside after they introduce this vaccine, they change the protocols how to establish that somebody is sick from this disease. Can you explain us a little?
Sure. The very first polio vaccine was introduced in 1955 in the United States, the Jonas Salk vaccine. And up until 1955, to diagnose a case of polio, you needed to have some symptoms 24 hours apart. That's it. That's all you needed. A little bit of weakness in your legs, 24 hours apart, and they would diagnose you with polio. However, after they introduced the vaccine, they changed the diagnostic criteria. And what they did is they made it you need to have some symptoms 60 days apart, and you needed to have a laboratory confirmation that it was the polio virus. And so obviously by making the requirements a lot more stringent, that was going to reduce the number of cases of polio in and of itself. Now, two interesting things. Number one, when they started actually looking for laboratory confirmation, what they found is a lot of in a significant proportion of the cases, they didn't find the polio virus. They found Coxsackie virus. They found other viruses. So they realized a lot of the cases that they had attributed to the polio virus had nothing to do with the polio virus. It had to do with some other virus. That's number one. Number two, in 1960, around 1960, the scientist of the day, when it wasn't so controversial like today. I mean, today you say polio vaccine, it's like you just said the name of God, right? But back then, they could have that discussion. And they did a re-analysis where they applied the same criteria that they used from 1955 to 1960 for 1950 to 1955, right? So that to see, okay, what would the number of cases look like before and after? And what they found was there wasn't a significant differential when they applied those criteria, the same criteria, pre-55 and after 55. I know that folks are led to believe that polio was, when you actually run those numbers, the number of people actually affected with polio was relatively small, meaning even before using the old diagnostic criteria in 1954, there was around about 1,000 deaths they attributed to polio, and a few multiple of that of paralysis. Upon doing the reanalysis, it got even smaller. So in any event, it's an inconvenient historical fact.